Hello, Dr. Amos here with you to support your continued journey academically with intermediate microeconomics. What we have done previously, we covered a very difficult topic. Number one, we have looked at the income and substitution effect as intrinsic part of any living organism analysis. Whenever there is experience and change in price, every living creature, subconsciously or consciously, is analyzing the price change as it applicable to itself from the perspective of income and substitution effect change. That was number one. And I know that is a hard topic. I will review that again in this video. And the second was using some simple algebra, we have derived a very interesting and fundamentally useful property of demand function. So in this case, we basically derived the demand function in such a way that consumers not just explain why they do what they do at the marketplace, but it also gives us a notion of predictability. So what you have in front of you is sum of weighted shared income elasticity must be equal to 1. So let me quickly pick up from here, and we'll talk about its relationship in terms of behavioral choices, and then we'll do some applications. I am promising that it's going to be very interesting, this video and the next one. All right, so let me go to the drawing board in here, and what we have is, again, sum of income elasticities weighted by the budget share must be equal to 1. So let's dissect this in two parts, because there is a part of income elasticity and there's a part of the share that each consumer spends on a particular good given its budget constraint. So I hope that you have chance to think about its application to the behavioral choices that we all have on a daily basis. Let me expand on that. So if you look at the sum of the budget shares, what would you find? What would be this number? Just think about it. You pause the video and you think about sum of the budget shares. The budget share, it was defined to you in a previous session as amount spent of the budget constraint on a particular good. So that is a fairly straightforward question. So please think about this. And now I'm going to answer this question by saying that it must be equal to 1. It should not exceed 1. So in other words, when you have multiple items to buy, when you go to the store, for example, the grocery store, you buy potatoes, you buy milk, you buy other things, and each item is the share of the budget or of the money that you have with you to spend in the store. So when you sum those shares, it must be equal to 1. So that's number one. Given that it is equal to 1, we are left with all behavioral changes must be due to the change in income elasticity. Since this is going to be equal to 1, and thus it's no longer matter. So given that is equal to 1, then it's clear that you can conclude that the sum of income elasticity must be equal to 1. That is a very powerful implication. And this is the question that I want to ask of you to think about this. If you pause the video and think about this, what does it mean when you sum income elasticities as it attributes to each item that you buy at the marketplace? In what sense it must be equal to 1? So you pause the video and you think about that question. What can you tell me about summation of income elasticities that it is identical to 1? Well, some income elasticities must have small number, others income elasticities must have large number, and when you sum all of them, they must be equal to 1. Now, the income elasticities that have large number will be representing superior good. Income elasticities that have small number, taking on small number, those are inferior good. So inferior good will constitute negative income elasticity, superior good positive income elasticity. And what's important according to our derivation is that summation of both must be equal to 1. Thus, this is what we can conclude. Very powerful. Every time we go to the marketplace and we pick up something that is classified inferior good, the next item must be superior good in order for balancing out those numbers and equivalency bringing to number 1. That's it. So that's the powerful implication of this property of demand function. Basically, you are saying that every person with its rationale, as long as they follow the axioms of consumer theory, they must, when buying inferior good, put in the basket in the market basket superior good in order for cancellation taking place to the point where summation of income elasticities weighted by the budget share must be equal to 1. So this is a very powerful and interesting demonstration that you will not find in your textbook material, how simple algebra can bring very powerful behavioral conclusion when it comes to consumption. All right, the next thing that I would like to do is to move towards application. Because at the end of the day, if we do all those theoretical propositions and deriving different and interesting things, it's worth very little, if anything, if you can't apply to the real life. So let's give it a shot with application. I'm going to now shift the gears a little bit and go back to substitution and income effect. I want you to appreciate the magnitude and the scope of the subject matter and how much it is critical to understand why people do what they do before they do it. And it's not just about people, but all living organisms as well. Giffen paradox. Giffen paradox is designed to explain Irish potato famine that took place in Ireland. And basically, the story goes like this. Beginning of 19th century, there was a series of wet seasons. It rains a lot on Ireland. And those series of wet seasons encouraged certain bacteria to grow that typically would be killed by dry conditions. But it started to grow and it started to destroy potatoes. Potatoes in Europe during an extended period of time has been a very reverent plant. In fact, ladies used to decorate their dresses with potato plants, as it was very fashionable and it was very respectable plant. So Giffen is or was English economist, and basically he attempted to explain why people chose to consume more potatoes in light of potato famine. And it's an interesting proposition because theoretically, my friends, it is not possible to eat more potatoes when there are fewer potatoes are being grown. Giffen paradox essentially is overwhelming income effect. That's what it is. It's overwhelming income effect in light of the substitution effect. And I'm going to look at this with you as you see it on the slide. So peasants in Ireland ate potatoes with every meal. And now with a potato blight, which led fewer potatoes available for consumption, many of those Irish people decided to immigrate to the United States. And that actually triggered the first significant wave of Irish citizens to move to the United States. Now, I have already said to you that it's not possible to eat more potatoes when there are few of them are grown. The only way for peasants to continue on an island was to take the money that was spent on something else other than potatoes and buy even more potatoes. But remember this simple fact that you can't eat more of something that is less available at the marketplace. So what did happen? Let's take a look. Essentially, what you are looking at, let me go to the drawing board here. What you are looking at is the choice between all other goods versus potatoes. So you start with the budget constraint and you start somewhere, let's say we'll pick that point at point A. So that is before the potato blight. You think to yourself that potato blight will lead to what outcome? When there are fewer potatoes being grown, what will happen to the price at the marketplace? And you should know this by now. The price at the marketplace will go up, and because it will go up, it will shift the budget constraint inward, as you see it on the graph. So the peasants essentially decided to move from consumption of potatoes and other goods at this level. Now they decide to consume even more potatoes and move to point B. And that's your Giffen paradox. So they have to reduce consumption of all other goods, and this reduction in consumption of all other goods allows them to expand marginally to increasing consumption of potatoes. So that's what you see on the graph. And then you want to dissect this into substitution and income effect. And remember the rule. You take the new budget constraint, which is this dotted line, given the price decrease, given the price increase, you move this dotted line until the point of tangency with original indifference curve. And look what happened. You're actually ending up right here at point C. So here's your substitution effect, is moving from A to C, because remember the substitution effect always shows how much people are willing to substitute away from relatively more expensive goods, and in this case it's a potato, to relatively less expensive good. And your income effect is moving from C to B. You can see here on this graph that income effect is huge. It's so huge it overwhelms the substitution effect. Now, we understand how it looks graphically. Let's think about this at a deeper level. It's seemingly contradicting to the first law of demand. As price for potatoes goes up, it appears that people eat more potatoes when the price went up. Is that a contradiction to the first law of demand? Just think about this for a moment. You can pause the video at any time and challenge yourself as I ask different questions. Try to stay ahead of me in your thinking. So in this case, Dr. M does not know any contradiction to the first law of demand, in fact. Thus, the first law of demand for you in the previous video was presented to you as part of the substitution effect. And if you look at the substitution effect, indeed, when people moving from A to C, they are moving away from more expensive good to relatively less expensive other goods, and thus they consume less potatoes given that the price for potatoes went up. So you see, moving from point A to C demonstrates consumption of less potatoes. However, income effect is so huge that it overwhelms the substitution effect. There's no contradiction of the first law of demand. People still respond to the first law of demand. People still respond to the first law of demand, and thus there is no contradiction. So let's go back and we'll massage this application a little bit more. I hope that you are now comfortable with graphical presentations. and we'll continue to apply this principle. So Giffen paradox essentially allowed us to understand what happens when people buy things at the marketplace at the time when the price is moving in a surprising direction. Let me give you another example, and perhaps that will be helpful to understand. In 2005, and you can dig up the information on the internet and find out that in 2005 the price for gasoline was increased significantly, in some places to $4 per gallon. And President Bush appealed to American public by stating, "My fellow countrymen, please do not use gasoline unless you need it." Well, from economic perspective, this sentence is disturbing, and let me tell you why. Who is to say that I don't need something when I'm ready to pay for it at the marketplace? Who is to say that I don't need something when I'm willing to buy it? And we discussed the difference between need and want. It's very subtle difference. In fact, in economics, we treat most needs as wants. The only difference between need and want, needs can be satisfied and wants cannot be satisfied. So if we go back to the President Bush statement, let's say if I buy gasoline and I burn it on my backyard for entertainment purposes, that's how I get entertained, hypothetically. If that's the case, who is to say that I shouldn't be doing it and I don't need the gasoline? So from economic perspective, when people go to the marketplace and they buy something, they need it. They want it. So, and for someone to say that don't buy unless you want it, unless you need it, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But the quandary here, my friends, is the following. It's been observed as prices went up for gasoline consumption, our fellow Americans increased consumption of gasoline. In fact, you could observe how drivers would come to the gas station and bring some cans, empty cans, to fill up extra and take home. What went wrong with our theory? How is it possible, as price increased, people consumed more gasoline? So if you want to pause this video and think about this question, that would be very helpful to you. But let me go and say that it's not a contradiction to the first law of demand, simply because what matters is not the absolute change in price, but what matters is perceived change in price. And perceived change in price was such that people expected that the future prices will go up. In other words, people expected that tomorrow gasoline is going to be even more expensive. Thus, they decided to buy it today, although today is more expensive than yesterday. So they anticipate the price increase and they respond accordingly, and such response is very consistent with the first law of demand, because they were engaging in avoidance of higher prices in the future. You see, So it's not a contradiction to the first law of demand. Now, let me quickly go through income and substitution effect one more time, because I know it could be a challenging topic for you to stand independently on your own. So I'm going to the drawing pad here, and I will consider two parts. Just follow me very carefully, because you guys need to understand how you can verbalize your hypothesis into graphical presentation, which is increasingly demanded by the firms at the marketplace, where you can do the graphs. So let's start with normal good we'll start with normal good. Normal good case, and we'll look into price decrease. Okay? Normal good case, price decrease. So you start with the budget constraint, and as always, you want to be diligent and map everything correctly, as I have taught you in previous videos. So you start at point A. You have seen this so many times. No problem. And now it's price decrease. Let's look at price decrease of x1. If you are going to consider price decrease, then the budget constraint shifts outward. Okay? And because it's a normal good case, you must end up somewhere in here. This is your point B. Almost done. So the next thing what you want to do, you want to essentially take this new budget constraint in the green color and shift it back to the original indifference curve until the point of tangency. And by doing so, you are essentially looking at perception of the price change for this consumer given the price decrease. So you're bringing this consumer back to the original indifference curve. So by pushing the budget constraint to the red line. And point C must be to the right of point A. Must be. Because that's how geometry is working out. And moving from A to C is your substitution effect. And moving from C to B is your income effect. And that is all describing the total effect moving from A to B. So every time there is a change in price, and prices change every day, every moment in our lives. You got some bacteria, and that is changing the price of your consumption for your everyday activity. You know, there was a car accident, that is changing price. You go to the marketplace and you see the milk has gone down in price. So you have to assign the prices carefully. So that is the total effect. Now I'm going to stop here, and when we come back, we will look at normal good price increase. And I think that is going to be very helpful to you and we'll continue to do some applications, and there are some exciting applications that are waiting ahead. Thank you, my friends, for your time.